In this lesson, we'll focus on grade 10 trigonometric graphs. Basically, these graphs are J3, are sine, rabal cos, and rabal tan. But in this lesson, we'll focus on sine and cos, and then on our next video, we'll focus on the tan. Now, our graph ya sine, and then after, we'll latelaga cos. More na the equation ya y is equals to a sine x. This a, it can be negative or positive number. And then sometimes in your exam, you create this type of equation: y is equals to a sine x plus or minus q. Actually, rationally the same equation: y is equals to a sine x. But now, graph ya itaba inali a movement up or down. This value q itaba affect the movement we're in. But as for now, we'll focus first on this one: y is equals to a sine x. The important thing still this graph, draw a graph. This graph is the specific shape. The shape ya sine is in this way. And then what's about draw a graph, we interpret your graph. Now, I'll draw a graph here: y is equals to sine x. This one is the original graph ya sine. In this case, our value a is 1. So, I'll a table method to draw this graph. And then more than the points on this table are 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. These points actually give the standard points. Jelori, draw a graph here, to include a journal always. Sometimes the graph here will from 0 if to 108. And then sometimes the graph here will from negative 360 to 360. But as for now, I'll do everything step by step. I'll equation ya rena mo ilori graph ya rena e ka 360 degrees. Sometimes go gonna draw this graph o shumisha calculator go graya points. But as for now, we'll shumisha a table method. As always, let's draw a graph. The coordinates. The coordinates in terms of x and y. So now more than the points are x. This means we'll create the corresponding y values. But our equation here y is equals to sine x. So we'll create the points are y. Everywhere more now x, substitute x here. This means auto press calculator where sine 0. If press sine 0, it'll offer 0. And then if press sine 90, it'll offer 1. And then if press sine 180, it'll offer 0. Sine 270, it'll offer negative 1. And then sine 360, it'll offer 0. So this means now we're the coordinates jarring, because the coordinates are in terms of x and y. This means we're 0 and 0. Rabali 90 and 1, 180 and 0, 270 and minus 1, 360 and 0. So Artoshmisha these points or plot a graph here. And then now more na Cartesian plane here. Cartesian plane here na y axis and then rabali x axis. So more na the points is x, which is 90, 180, 270 and 360. So Rattle join these coordinates 0 and 0, 90 and 1, 180 and 0, 270 and minus 1, 360 and 0. 0 and 0 the origin. And then 90 and 1 it's over here. Remember already 90 get x and then 1 get y. So always the points are 11. This is 90 and this is 1. And then 180 and 0, 180 and 0 it will be. And then 270 and minus 1 is this one. Always the points are now we know already they are 11. And then 360 and 0 it over here. And then from here I will join the points are in Rabale graph. So now re na le graph ya rena ya y is equals to sin x. So go draw a graph always is very easy. Ge be le gore graph ya gago e felela ka 180, e ra gore o bo tlo ba le graph ya gago ya ba le this part fela, because e tla be felela ka 180. So always re šomiša scale se ba re fa sone. And then now because re drawile graph, o tlo tshwanela gore o tsebe go interpreta this graph, because ba tlo botša a lot of question from this graph. Ge o ka lebelela this graph e felela mo go y-axis mo go point ya 1, and then ka mo fase e felela on -1. So because this point e ka mo go di-positive, and then ke mo le gore graph ya rena e felela gona, this point re bitša gore ke a maximum. So if ba ka re find the maximum, e ra gore your maximum is equals to 1, and then ka mo fase because ke di-negative, e ra gore your minimum is equals to -1. And then another thing that is very important ke a range. Actually range ke all possible y values that our graph will include. Because this is y, and then ke di-points tša y, a graph ya rena on y include this point fela ya 1 and -1. So if ba ka re find a range, re ngwala minimum and maximum. Minimum ya rena ke -1, and then maximum ya rena ke 1. So always re thoma ka minimum and then ra ngwala maximum. O ska šomiša this bracket, because this bracket and this bracket di na le meaning. This one ke included bracket, and then this one ke excluded bracket. If wena o ka šomiša this one, e rela gore this number and this number di excluded, meaning you don't include this number, so o tlo ba wrong. Instead o tlo tshwana gore šomiše this one box, because this one e rela gore included, e rela gore include this number -1 and 1. So be careful on that one. And then re na le what we call amplitude. Actually amplitude ke the average distance between the minimum and the maximum. Graph ya rena is in this way, on y e felela here. So re nyaka the distance between these points from here to here, and then from here to here. So re nyaka distance ya gona. Re nyaka distance re tlo kry in this way. Amplitude is equals to y maximum minus y minimum divided by 2. Maximum ya rena ke 1, and then minimum ya rena ke -1. So yo ba 1 minus -1 it will fa 2, because negative and negative it will fa +1. So 1 plus 1 is 2, and then 2 divided by 2 ke 1. So this means our amplitude ke 1. Ge o ka lebelela this equation, e re y is equals to 1 sin x. The truth is this number always e re botša ka the amplitude, but amplitude is always positive. Remember gore sometimes re ka kgona go ba le this graph ya y is equals to minus sin x. Ge re ka ba le this graph, this means our amplitude it tlo ba 1. It cannot be -1, because amplitude is always positive, because ke distance. So le ge o ka ba le -1, your amplitude it tlo ba positive. This number e re botša ka the amplitude, or o ka no šomiša this formula ya y maximum minus y minimum. And then it's important gore o tsebe go find this value ya a ge ba draw a graph. Let's say now ba draw a graph in this way. Ge ba ka drawela this graph, let's say ba file this equation, and then ba draw this graph, but find the value of a, meaning determine the value of a o lebeletše this graph. Actually go find this value o tlo lebelela a peak to peak. Graph ya sign always e thoma go 0, always e thoma go 0. Ge re draw ya this graph, this is our first peak. Ge o ka lebelela this first peak e felela on this line, e felela mo go 1. So this means the value of a it will be 1. And then ge be le gore this graph, let's say e fihla go 2, this is our first peak. Ge re draw a graph, e re la gore the value of a e be tlo ba 2. And then ge re draw ya graph ya y is equals to minus sin x, The truth is this shape it will change. Graph ya rena e tlo thoma ka mo di negative, but re tlo draw that graph later o tlo bona gore e tsamaya bjang. So let's say o draw this graph and then e thoma ka mo di negative, and then question ya gore what is the value of a? The value of a it will be -1, because our first peak ga re draw ya this graph ka gone bona re ga re draw ya first peak ya rena e thoma ka mo fatshe, but ge ka lebelela this one our first peak e thoma ka mo godimo. So that is why e ba positive, but this one because e tla be thoma ka fatshe ka di negative e ra gore the value of a e tlo ba negative. This is because e fella ka mo go -1 and then e thoma ka mo di negative. So ke ilo tse botlhokwa tse le re tshwanetse re tsebe ka these graphs. And then another thing e le re ba tlo botša yona ke a period. Let's understand that what is a period. Actually, a period is the number of degrees it takes for the graph to complete its shape. This graph in a specific shape. This is the standard shape ya sine. But this is true or this graph e ka tšwela pele ya ba in this way, ya ba in this way, ya continue ka this pattern. But lemoga something, after 360 degrees, this shape yet repeat. This shape no tshwana le this shape. So because period is the number of degrees it takes for the graph to complete its shape, our period is 360 degrees, because after 360 degrees this graph is repeater the same thing. So in grade 10 ge ba ka re find the period ya sine or ya cos, always period ya wana ke 360 degrees. Even if graph ya gago e ka feta 360 degrees ba go draw yona just for confusion, but what is the period? Always period ya gago ke 360 degrees. Even if graph ya gago e ka fela go 108, but your period will always be 360 degrees. Ke the standard period ya the sine. So in grade 10 nothing will change. And then another thing you already discussed already ke a domain. Actually a domain ke mo e le gore graph ya gago e thoma gona yo fella gona for the x. Ga ka lebela graph ya rena e thoma mo go 0 and then e fella mo go 360 degrees. So e rela gore x is an element of 0 degrees and 360 degrees. Ke mo e le gore graph ya rena include the points ja x. Sometimes in your exam ba go fa but x is an element of negative 360 degrees and 360 degrees, but o draw a graph. So e rela gore graph ya e tlo thoma on negative 360 and then ya felela on 360. So ke lo tše botlhokwa tše re tshwanetse di tsebe. O tseba domain, o tseba range, o tseba the minimum, o tseba the maximum, and then o tseba go find the value of a ge ba draw a graph. Now I label the same graph here, y is equals to sine x. But as for now, graph here na it from negative. It from negative 360 degrees and then you fell on positive 360 degrees. So I told you the same thing. Everywhere move on our x, auto substitute a value ya x. Auto press a calculator our sign and then one will get a negative 360, it over 0 and then 1 0 -1 0 1 0 -1 and 0. So ke di coordinates tša rena. Now re ka di joina gore kgona draw ya graph. Negative 360 e na le 0 era re tlo ba this one, and then negative 270 e na le 1, this means ke this one, and then negative 180 e na le 0 ke this one, and then negative 90 in a negative 1, this means ke this one, 0 and 0 ke origin, 90 in a 1, 180 in a 0, this means ke this one, 270 and minus 1 ke this one, 360 and 0 ke this one. So now we can join the points tša rena. So this is our graph. O ka kgona lemoga gore this part ke graph ra wa draw ya thoma ka 0 ya felela ka positive 360, and then re ka lebella this one actually sale the same thing, you know, now e ka mo di negative. This is because graph ya rena e thoma from negative 360 and then e felela on positive 360, and then the properties is sale the same, more le our maximum and then more le our minimum. So we're saying the same thing here. It's about on how to find the range, the maximum, the minimum, the amplitude. The only difference now are domain here x is an element of negative 360 degrees and then positive 360 degrees. So this is our new domain. So it's important to remember always original graph ya sign e feta through the origin e thoma go 0. So the next graphs tše re tlo di draw yago o tlo lemoga gore graph tša gona sometimes di ka thoma go 1, so e tla ba ile modification, maybe ba e modifyile graph ya rena ba e move up or down, but the original graph always ya sign e thoma on 0. So ke ntho e le gore tshwanetse o e tsebe always. Now I move on. Now I'll draw here this one. Y is equals to minus sin x. O ka kgona bona gore now the only difference gore this value ya a it's negative, it's no longer positive. Previous one e be le positive 1, but re tlo dira the same thing. Re tlo kry-a the corresponding y values. O tlo pressa negative sign and then wa insert these values 0 to 360 degrees. In this case graph ya rena re thoma from 0. Ge o nyaka e thoma from negative 360 o tlo dira the same thing, but the procedure will remain the same. Now I can press a negative sign 0, it will fa 0, and then this one it will fa negative 1, and then it will fa 0, it will fa 1, and then it will fa 0. This is if you press a negative sign on your calculator. Now we will join the points renale 0 and 0, and then rabali 90 and minus 1, rabali 180 and 0, 270 and 1, 360 and 0. So now re tlo join the points tša rena. And then go ka lebella this shape o kgona bona gore the difference between this shape and the previous one, yeah, y is equals to sin x. More na le value a which is positive, and then now more na le value a which is negative. Now ka kgona bona gore graph ya rena, because this value of a it's negative, graph ya rena e thoma ka mo di negative. The first peak e ka mo di negative. Remember our original graph here na ya y is equals to positive sin x eba in this way. So this one it thoma ka mo di negative because the value ke a negative. And then now let's say ba botša ka maximum what is graph. So ka kgona bona gore maximum is sale the same thing. Maximum ke 1 and then minimum ke negative 1. So range it will be the same thing because there is range ke minimum and maximum. So this means our range it will be negative 1 and 1. And then what is the amplitude? Remember really this number the amplitude, but the amplitude will never be negative. So our amplitude is positive 1. Remember ka kgona go amplitude in this way, ware y maximum minus y minimum divide by 2. So maximum it's positive 1, and then minimum it's negative 1, and then divide by 2. So erfa 1. And then more na le graph ya y is equals to sin x. So re tlo dira graph ya y is equals to 2 sin x, and then re nyaka go bona gore what's the difference between this graph ge e thoma ka 1 and then le ge e thoma ka any number greater than 1. O to press a calculator ya gago gore kgone kry-a the corresponding y values. O to dira the same thing. O to press 2 sin and then move on our x wa nokela di values tša gago tša x. So it will fa 0, ya fa 2, ya fa 0, ya fa -2, and then ya fa 0. And then from there ka join di points tša rena. Re na le 0 and 0, and then ra ba le 90 and 2. So ra ba le 180 and 0, ra ba le 270 and -2, ra ba le 360 and 0. And then now our joined points tša rena. So ke a graph ya rena ya y is equals to 2 sin x. A re lebelele what's the difference between graph ya y is equals to sin x and y is equals to 2 sin x. O ka kgona lemoga gore this one maximum e fela mo go 1, but now because this one e re ke 2, maximum e ba mo go 2. So every time ge graph ya gago e ka re y is equals to, let's say ya ba 3 sin x, so re la gore graph ya gago e tlo thoma from 0 and then ya felela on 3, on maximum. And then ge e ka ba -3, re tseba re negative e thoma ka fase, e ra gore e be tlo ya ka fase ya ba something like this one. So let's say ba file this equation, y is equals to a sin x, and then ba re determine the value of a. Re lebeletše this graph ya y is equals to 2 sin x ke this one ye green. So ge re draw ya this graph, o ka kgona bona gore our first peak e ka mo di positive and then e felela mo go 2. So e ra gore the value of a obvious e be tlo ba this one ya 2. So you know what the difference between y is equals to sin x and y is equals to 2 sin x. So any value mo ke ge ka ba 4 e ra gore graph ya thoma ka 4. So the important thing gore o kgona draw ya graph and then kgona go interpret, o kgona go kry-a the maximum, o kgona go kry-a the minimum, the range, the amplitude. So everything is the same. The key thing gore wena kgona go tseba go draw ya graph ya gago. So a re lebelele another one. And then now re tlo draw ya graph ya y is equals to sin x plus 1. This one is in the form of y is equals to a sin x plus or minus q. In this case, our q is positive 1. So when you go draw your graph, we do the same thing. We do press sign, and then one will get a value of your x, and then one plus 1. In this case, we do the in this way. We do sign, and then one 0, one plus 1, and then we do create these values. Ranali 0 and 1, and then ravali 90 and 2. So this means 90 and 2, you have this one, 180 and 1, and then ravali 270 and 0, and then ravali 360 and 1. Remember this one, ke dori loga bo pink, ke y is equals to sin x. So re nyaka di compare, re kgone bona the difference. So re tlo join these points. So more nale y is equals to sin x plus 1. Lemoga gore the difference gore this graph ya y is equals to sin x is only the same graph, but now this graph by gogetše godimo ka 1. This is because more nale positive 1, so that is why ya ka di positive. Go ka imagine this graph gabotse o ka kgona bona gore ba gogetše godimo fela ka point 1. Ga o ka tšea this graph wa gogela godimo, o tla bona gore it will fa something like this one. Remember mo be re na le 0 and 0, so now re na le 0 and 1, and then mo be re na le 90 and 1, but now re na le this one e re 90 and 2, and then mo be re na le 180 and 0, but now ke 180 and 1. So e ra gore ba ino go ga this graph godimo ka 1 point, which is +1, because ke +1. And then ge o ka draw ya y is equals to sine +2, e ra gore graph ya gago ke this one mara ba e gogela 2 units up. And then ge e be e le negative, e ra gore e sale the same graph mara ba e gogela down ka whatever the unit ba tla ba e gogela ka yona. Ge e le gore ke -1, e ra gore ba e gogela fase ka 1 unit. So actually this value ya q e determine the vertical shift. Graph ya rena e ya godimo or e ya fase. If it's positive, e ra gore graph ya rena e ya godimo, and then if it's negative, e ra gore graph ya rena e ya fase. So let's say ba file this equation where y is equals to, let's say, sine x plus q, and then ba botsisha ba re what is the value of q ba go draw this graph. The first thing o tlo tshwana gore o gopole original graph ya sine. Original graph ya sine always e thoma mo 0. This graph ke ya sine, ke original graph ya sine, e thoma on 0. But now graph ya rena go ka ilebelela ga e sa thoma go 0, e thoma go 1. This means that this graph ba gogetše 1 unit up. This means o tlo re q is equals to 1. So ke lo tše gore tshwanetse di lebelele always. And then now on this graph here y is equals to sine x plus 1, I find the maximum. Maximum ya rena ke this one, and then minimum ya rena ke this one. Because this one it toucha on the x-axis, e ra gore minimum e tlo ba 0, and then maximum e tlo ba 2. So e rela gore maximum e tlo ba 2, and then minimum e tlo ba 0. So e rela gore our range e tlo ba 0 and 2. And then now re nyaka amplitude, re tlo šomiša this formula. So robale 2 minus 0 divide by 2, and then ya re fa 1. So e rela gore ke amplitude ya rena. And then now more na le graph ya cos x. So re tlo dira the same thing like ya sine, but ga ke tlo tsenelela in details because this graph ya cos ga e fapane golo le ya sine. So everything remains the same. A change is very small, so ke tlo focus on that change fela. A re thome ka original graph ya cos, ke y is equals to cos x, and then re tlo tshwanela gore re kreye the corresponding y values. So o tlo pressa your calculator wa re cos, and then wa substitute ka x values. O tlo kreye 1 0 -1 0 and 1, and then now re ka kgona go joina di points tsa rena ra draw a graph. 0 and 1 is this one, and then 90 and 0 ke this one, and then 180 and -1 ke this one, 270 and 0, 360 and 1 ke this one. And then now ga re joina points tsa rena re bala something like this one. And then now more na le shape ya rena ya cos. Lebelela the difference between cos and sine. The only key difference kore graph ya sine always e passa through the origin, but graph ya cos always e thoma on the y-axis. So this one ka kgona bona re thoma mo go 1, amplitude e ra gore ke 1, and then ge ba ka re determine the maximum o ka kgona bona gore this is our maximum, and then our minimum ke this one. So range always ke minimum and maximum, so everything remains the same. That same thing with our sine, it will apply on cos. So the only difference for graph ya cos it thoma on the y-axis. So ge be le gore mo rena le y is equals to 2x, obvious e ra gore e be tlo thoma kwa go 2. So a re lebelele ge le gore graph ya rena e thoma ka go di negative re tlo ba bjang, and then ge e thoma ka go di negative e tlo ba in this way. O ka kgona bona gore mo re thomile ka -360, so re joinle these points and then ra bale this shape. So everything remains the same. Ge ba ka re determine maximum e tlo ba this one, and then minimum it will be this one. So everything remains the same. The only difference of the graph here na cos it thoma on the y-axis. This is y is equals to cos x. And then this one here, y is equals to minus cos x. Ga ile gore e thoma ka go di negative, so ka kgona bona gore value ya rena e thoma ka mo negative. So if question e ka re determine the value of a, o tlo lebelela graph ya ga gore ga o e draw ya e thomile ko kae. So ka kgona bona gore ga o e draw ya o thomile ka mo go di negative. So the first peak ya rena e ra gore e tswelela from this negative, then round the value of a, it's -1. So everything remain the same or tshwana sign, but the only difference or graph here it thoma on the y-axis. So don't be confused. And then more nale graph j2, nale graph here y is equals to cos x, get this one green, and then rabale y is equals to cos x plus 1. This one key in the form of y is equals to a cos x plus or minus q. It's in this form. Y is equals to a cos x plus or minus q. So let's say this q is a vertical movement, either up or down. But because now our q is 1, our graph here now move with 1. We can this graph this one bana ba ile gore ba gogetše godimo ka 1 unit. So e rela gore in your exam ge ba ka go fa graph ya gago in this form, where y is equals to cos x plus q, and then but what is the value of q? Wena o tlo tshwana gore o tsebe original ya cos. Graph ya cos originally e thoma on the y-axis, in the amplitude ya 1 always ke original graph. So because ba re this graph ke ya cos, and then o ka kgona bona gore amplitude ya gona ga se 1, e rela gore this graph ba e gogetše godimo ka 1 unit. So e ra gore the value of q e tlo ba 1, because moving from 1 to 2 e ra gore ke 1 unit. So e ra gore q is equals to 1. So that's the important thing ya gore o tsebe the original graph ya cos, and then o tsebe le the original graph ya sine. So o tseba what is the amplitude, o tseba the period, o tseba the domain, everything remains the same. So e ra gore on this graph, this one ge o nyaka the maximum wa gago yo ba this one ke 2, and then minimum wa gago yo ba 0 because it toucha the x-axis. And then ge o nyaka amplitude, always maximum minus minimum divide by 2. So it's all the same thing you have to reapply on the side. So that's it for this tutorial.